A warm welcome to all. In memory, in hope, and in love, we join together as one to honor our brother Paul and to thank God, who is the mystery and source of all of our life and loving. Scripture teaches us that for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to harvest. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. So let us take this time that we have together, to offer our gratitude and our love. Gratitude and love for a good and kind man, a steady presence, a gifted writer and weaver of stories, a fierce handball player, some say, a husband and father whose love ran deep, and a friend whose wit and warm heart made our world a far more interesting and colorful place. Paul came from the heartland, places with stories, where he learned how to weave and to carry on those stories. You all are part of his story. Mary and Dylan and Snowy know that you are, of course, central in the recurring theme of love that was woven into his story. And the rest of us, relatives and friends and handball partners, students, once young athletes, fellow coaches, movie buffs, and philosophers, you too are all part of Paul's larger tale. And it doesn't end here. May it roll on and on and on as Paul is remembered in all of the places that he inhabited, remembered with love and gratitude and grace. Will you join me in prayer? Spirit of life and mystery, we pause and are still, so still. To breathe in each moment of life with a sense of gratitude for all good gifts of beauty and love and generosity and grace. We pause to sense the cycles of life and death, for we know that we are all part of this endless and mysterious cycle of existence. We pause, too, to recognize the pain of loss. May those who grieve be lifted by gratitude and by hope. We thank you for Paul's lively and passionate spirit and for the legacy of love and creativity he brought into this world. Thank you that the light of Paul's love persists even through death, as it lives on in all gathered here. So be with us now as we seek comfort and peace, as we release Paul into your tender care. All this we offer as our common prayer. Amen. We are about to enjoy a hymn that is sung for us by the St. Olaf Choir at a distance. It is their sort of hallmark song, Beautiful Savior, and it may be familiar to many of us. And if you'd like to sing along, it's hymn number 630 in that purple hymnal in front of you. If you'd like to sing along, you don't need to. Know, too, that St. Olaf Choir is known for starting with the last verse first, I believe, in this one. I'm not sure if it's in this rendition. So if it begins, beautiful Savior, go to the end, the last verse. If it starts, fairest Lord Jesus, stick there with the first verse. Let us enjoy this music. We'll sing the other verses to ourselves. A number of Paul's family and friends will be speaking to us to give us their particular perspective and angle in reflecting on his life. So now I invite Anne to come forward. And those of you who will be reading, just come up when your name is in the bulletin. I don't need to introduce you because you're introduced here. Great, Anne. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate this gathering for my wonderful, sweet uncle, Paul. I'm actually going to be speaking on my mother's behalf, who unfortunately was not able to travel. We live in Boston, and she was just not able to make the trip. So I have the following words, and I'm going to try to channel my mother's voice to read to you all. And if you knew my mother, she's an interesting girl. The Gronseth family is a family of words and music. So here they come from Sister Jenny. Memories from Minot, North Dakota. Baby Paul in a 3-room house after the war with Grandma Paulson, Dad, Mom, Sister Jenny, and Uncle Gerald. Paul was 5 years younger than me and remembers not much, but I do. All the ear infections, all the snowsuits, all the Paulsons and Heskins. Fun to be close to family. North Dakota memories, old or new, were important to Paul. A test of love, farm sitting, watching snow blow from right to left, then left to right across the highway. Moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, for Dad's new job. Paul was 3 years old, but we went on top of the garage roof with Ginny because the snow was that high. Mom must have been crazy. I went through a tornado in Minneapolis. You were too young to remember, but I do. Still memories of times of Paul and with Paul. By the way, When you traveled with Paul then, he would only eat tomato soup and hot dogs. Hard to find that for breakfast. Does he still do that, Mary? Our next stop was to Jacksonville, Illinois. Paul really grew up here and graduated from high school here. We lived at Jacksonville State Hospital, built in Lincoln's time. No air conditioning. We lived in staff housing. There were 3,000 patients. It's an unusual place to grow up. Here he played baseball. Mom, it's shirts, not blouses that they wear. Brought his first car here. He had a bad accident on a summer job when the truck he was working in exploded in a propane fire. He jumped through the fire. It was a very tough recovery, but he was still a groomsman at my marriage to Ed. Thank you, Paul. I left for college in 1960. Paul, an only child at last. I only returned to Jacksonville for some holidays and visits. He's on his own, although I did start to send him lists of books that I liked. Would you believe he was not a reader? I released a monster. Paul graduated and started the college search. St. Olaf was a family connection. Our grandfather was a professor and a voice teacher during the creation of the famous St. Olaf Choir. Paul became Gronseth #2 in the yearbooks. A connection was also made there that will always be the high point of Paul's life and also to ours. Barry Morrow, a beautiful, treasured, forever friend. Thank you, Barry. You are a blessing. Paul helped create our family events, although in Boston. A wedding with our Anne and Henry. He escorted his special needs niece down the aisle. It was a proud moment for all of us on that very special day. Paul so enjoyed knowing Anne and Henry's sons, Jack and Max. He could see their special and kind personalities just like their parents. I'm rolling my eyes. Paul decided to keep checking out colleges as the field of film became an interest. He liked cold Minnesota winters, but California, here he comes. Interesting that he kept attending St. Olaf now and then. However, he was becoming a California guy. The Midwest and North Dakota were always there, but beloved Paulson cousins were now in Seattle. So to Claremont he comes. He's carrying a big dictionary and a Remington typewriter. Here we go. In Claremont he stayed and met Mary Marvin, a girl he never thought that he would find. 2 beautiful boys, Dylan and Adrian. Snowy, a name that Dylan gave him. They soon arrived. Lots of writing, music, and sports. Mary and Paul organized so many sporting events, I thought that they would name a sports field after them. Memories of Claremont I will leave to the locals. Everyone's life bulges with events. Thank you, Paul, for many good memories. Always in my heart. I love you, Ginny. Pardon me. I just wanted to follow that up with a few words about my Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul was my sweet, kind, confident. Despite the physical distance between us, we were always very close. And the older we both got, the more meaningful our relationship became. I will miss our regular phone calls. You were the easiest person to talk to, especially with your smooth and soothing radio star voice. Your amazing intellect and passion for literature, history, and sports, they left me in awe. But what I always will remember most is how much you loved your family. It's been a very difficult year for all of you. While we are relieved that your physical suffering has come to an end, we will miss you deeply. I just wanted to end it with a brief quote from Helen Keller I just found very meaningful. What we have once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose, for all that we love deeply becomes a part of us. I'll miss you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed that. Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Berger. I've known Paul for 40 years through handball. I've lived in Claremont for 38 of those years. And for those 38 years with Paul, not only was he a good handball buddy, but he was a personal friend as well. I'd like to share some words from the handball community to show how much we appreciated Paul as both a writer and a player. First three sentiments are from people who worked with Paul at the United States Handball Association, the USHA. Vern Roberts. Vern Roberts was 30 years the executive director of the USHA and 40 years the publisher of the USHA magazine. His notes. A good guy. Those were the words of Art Padilla, who doesn't have much good to say about anybody. Back in the 80s, Paul and Art made life so much easier for me in putting out what we thought was a quality handball magazine. Both were great writers, offering in-depth knowledge of the game and even constructive criticism when appropriate. For the record, they made a terrible doubles team. As usual, Padilla blamed his partner. Also, as usual, Paul would say that he didn't do what needed to be done. After all, Paul was always the good guy. Reporting doesn't do justice to Paul's insights and clear picture of what he saw on the handball court. In fact, I learned to try different things as a result of Paul's printed words. And he always made sense and made the story clear to me and the handball readers. Paul was such a great writer. We were lucky to have his words in the magazine. Paul helped me make me and others a better handball player, and he made me a better writer. I've missed him for years and connected far too infrequently. So sorry this is a final goodbye for me, handball, and most of all his family. Matt Kruger. He's the current USHA Executive Director and Editor of the United States Handball Association's magazine. Paul was a consummate handball player and gifted storyteller. I was fortunate to meet him at our nationals when his quick and sincere compliments revealed a generous heart. I recognized his name from stories in our handball library. And when he expressed a desire to write again, I was glad to welcome him back. One of his articles, Handball's Golden Age, where he ranked the sport's greatest players, stirred some of the most spirited responses we'd seen in years. Paul understood how to craft a story that sparked conversation and connected us through shared memories and debate. If you haven't read Mark Pennock is a great player in San Diego, Mark Pennock's A Closer Look feature on Paul, I encourage you to do so. You can Google it, you'll find it, A Closer Look. It's a fitting tribute to a remarkable man. I'll miss his emails and phone calls. Whenever we talked, it always felt like we lifted each other's spirits. Godspeed, Paul. We know you've already found a court and are penning another great story. Gary Cruz, 20 years a Southern California Commissioner for the USHA and the Director of Youth Development. Paul Gronseth was a writer, but to those of us in the small world of handball, he was revered for his stories of our sport. Most of the readers were unaware that we were reading an article written by a passionate writer. What they knew was that we were reading something written by someone who shared the same passion they did for handball. Paul's words nailed the essence of handball and the people who play it. In the 2020 article, Paul's picks for the best players of the last 4 decades listed like Barry, Nadia Alvarado, Paul Brady, David Chapman, and others known in the world of handball. But I was captivated by how Paul reached outside the handball community with his writings. Handball was blessed to have someone as eloquent as Paul to provide words and prose for our game. A few words from his Claremont Club handball buddies over the years. Steve Mancini, not here today. He just had a knee replaced. I want to say how lucky I felt to have Paul as a partner. He was a talented player. Playing with him was always easy. And we made a great team. Even though he was a lefty, he often played the right side, and somehow we always seemed to play better that way. Paul truly loved the game. He was friendly and had a great sense of humor. I enjoyed his friendship, and I will miss him. Scott Brotzman, who's here today along with Bill Chavessa, another of our veteran handball players from the Claremont Tennis Club. I would like to share how great it's been over the last 40 years, being Paul's handball buddy and friend. We played 3 days a week like clockwork. Playing against Paul, you would be victim to his awesome lob serve and his powerful left-handed back wall kill shot. Playing with him, you would enjoy many intense victories that we would later enjoy and brag about discussing them in the lockers room. His love for the perfect game was further shared and admired by his writing skills in handball magazines and his lifelong commitment and contribution to the United States Handball Association. As a side note, in Paul's A Closer Look interview, it was an interview by Mark Pinnock of San Diego in the Handball magazine a few years ago. He was prompted, name one of your favorite doubles partners. Paul's response was, Scott Brotzman, because he never rolls his eyes when I mess up. I'll give him a kidney if he ever needs a kidney. Personally, I want to offer my sincere condolences to Mary, Dylan, and Snowy. Dylan and Snowy, your dad spoke about you with so much pride as you were growing up. Whether it was your accomplishments in sports, music, or just who you were becoming, he loved you both very much. To me, Paul wasn't just a good handball player and gifted writer. Above all, he was a proud and loving father. Paul, thank you for the battles on the court, your insight and warmth in your writing, and most of all, your friendship. God rest your soul.
have some music now? Oh, okay. I asked the family if there would be a particular reading that would be appropriate, a text, and their delightful response was that it should come from my Antonia, who is one of Paul's favorite writers, and it's the my Antonia apparently was his favorite, one of his favorite novels, and so this is the ending. I took a long walk north of town, out into the pastures, where the land was so rough that it had never been plowed up, and the long red grass of early times still grew shaggy over the draws and hillocks. Out there, I felt at home again. Overhead, the sky was that indescribable blue of autumn, bright and shadowless, hard as enamel. To the south, I could see the dun-shaded river bluffs that used to look so big to me, and all about stretched, drying cornfields of the pale gold color. I remembered it so well. Russian thistles were blowing across the uplands and piling against the wire fences like barricades. Along the cattle paths, the plumes of goldenrod were already fading into sun-warmed velvet, gray with gold threads in it. I had escaped from the curious depression that hangs over little towns, and my mind was full of pleasant things. Trips I meant to take with the Cusack boys in the Badlands and up on the stinking water. There were enough Cusacks to play with for a long while. Even after the boys grew up, there would always be Cusack himself. I meant to tramp along a few miles of lighted streets with Cusack. As I wandered over those rough pastures, I had the good luck to stumble upon a bit of the first road that went from Black Hawk out to the North Country, to my grandfather's farm, and then on to the Chamaradas and to the Norwegian settlement. Everywhere else it had been plowed under when the highways were surveyed. This half mile or so within the pasture fence was all that was left of the old road, which used to run like a wild thing across the open prairie, clinging to the high places and circling and doubling like a rabbit before the hounds. On the level land, the tracks had almost disappeared, were mere shadings in the grass, and a stranger would not have noticed them. But whenever the road had crossed a draw, it was easy to find. The rains had made channels of the wheel ruts and washed them so deeply that the sod had never healed over them. They looked like gashes torn by grisly claws on the slopes where the farm wagons used to lurch out of the hollows with pull that brought curling muscles onto the smooth hips of the horses. I sat down and watched the haystacks turn rosy in the slanting sunlight. This was the road over which Antonio and I came on that night when we got off the train at Black Hawk and were bedded down in the straw, wondering children being taken we knew not whither. I had only to close my eyes to hear the rumbling of wagons in the dark and to be again overcome by the obliterating strangeness. The feelings of that night were so near that I could reach out and touch them with my hand. I had the sense of coming home to myself and of having found out what a little circle man's experience is. For Antonio and me, this had been the road of destiny, had taken us to those early accidents of fortune which predetermined for us all that we can ever be. Now I understood that the same road was to bring us together again. Whatever we had missed, we possessed together the precious, the incommunicable past.
Good afternoon. Clearly, I am not Cloyce Morrow. Anyone who knows Cloyce, our personalities are pretty much polar opposites. I am Brian Edwards, and I was not a student of Mr. Gronseth, but I did have the privilege of working alongside him for a number of years. We shared an office, we shared a classroom, and we shared a lot of stories along the way. I was asked to speak about his impact to the Cardin community. We'd be here all evening if we were to go into every detail, but we do have a few letters from some of his students and some of the parents who were lucky enough to encounter Mr. Gronseth along the way. So the first one states, "Dear Mr. Gronseth, you have by far been my favorite teacher. Your funny jokes, as they say, are what makes you a good teacher. I agree. However, I admire your sense of recognizing so many authors and deciding on what you should think about them. You not only study those people and writers, but by the way you lecture about them, you have a passion for saying and finding more and more information on them. I will miss you very much, and I thank you for teaching me and pushing me to work so hard." Another states, this is from a parent, "Mr. Gronseth, this is just a token of appreciation for how much you have inspired and motivated my daughter. She's lucky to have had you as a teacher. God must have a special place for folks like you who give so much. For all the times that she will know something, have read something wonderful, or will seek to understand something because of you, I thank you." And a third, "Dear Mr. Gronseth, having you as a teacher has been a blast, and I'll always remember you for your classic jokes and hilarious voices. You've been an inspiring teacher, and I'll always carry your wisdom throughout my life. P.S. Sorry for sleeping in class." Pretty sure that student's here this afternoon. Like I said, I wasn't a student of Mr. Gronseth, but that doesn't mean I wasn't a recipient of his lessons. I started at Cardin as a young teacher, hardly knowing anything about teaching. And I knew that Mr. Gronseth was there listening to my lessons. He sat on the other side of the wall, and I just knew that if I messed up along the way, I was coming into a desk full of books. He never criticized, he never joked, he never insulted me. I just knew that larger the stack of books, the more I messed up. As the years went on and I listened to the lessons he was teaching me, that stack of books got shorter and shorter. And for a while I thought, well, he just must be running out of books. We all know that's not true. So I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned from him. It's because of him that I became a better teacher. I'm not a great writer, I'm not a great public speaker, but all the people who had the luxury of knowing Mr. Gronseth, they are. They're all sitting back here in the back of the church this afternoon, and I think they'll attest to the impact that he had as a teacher. His lessons continue on, his legacy continues, and we're all better for having known him. So Mr. Gronseth, thank you for the lessons that we will continue to teach.
My name's Juli. I have the privilege of marrying Snowy in October, and so Paul will be my father-in-law. And we wanted to sing this song for him that Snowy wrote.
I'll start it with just a little bit of one of his favorite songs, played on his old harmonica.
My friend, Paul Gronseth, was not a man to pull punches, so neither will I. I'm here today to give it to you straight. The good, the bad, and the snuggly. Mostly the snuggly, because the road we shared, the two of us, it was a real buddy story. But not at the start, not at the fade in. It was our sophomore year at St. Olaf College. We lived in the dark, dank basement of a home with no windows, and kind of smelled like a boys' locker room, but it was our locker room. Paul would sit in his room and listen to Coltrane or opera. I just studied and played Blonde on Blonde until the needle just about wore through the vinyl. Paul read. He read constantly, mostly Russian novels, but hardly ever his textbooks. It didn't seem like he even needed to study, which again is all I basically did, really. I just studied, which looking back was a pretty pathetic way of spending my college days. On weekends, Paul would go off to the big city of Minneapolis, and he'd come home in the wee hours of Sunday, and he'd have with him a watch or a pair of stereo speakers or whatever he could win in a poker game in Minneapolis or in a pool hall. He was damn good at both of them. I never figured out how Paul got around because he didn't have a car, and he never offered much about those excursions into Minneapolis. There were a lot of things going on inside of Paul then. He often looked sort of troubled inside, the way James Dean did in all of his movies. In fact, Paul looked just like James Dean back then, very, very handsome in his Sears and Roebuck leather jacket, which came to the house as hard as a horse saddle, and it took him 3 years to break that sucker in. Paul lived with us, that is, Bev and me, during one hippie summer in the 70s. And that's when it happened to Paul. His transformation. In any case, he lightened up, far out, a new guy. And that summer, he took a trip with a somewhat insane friend of ours named Berger, and they wandered all over the country looking at Civil War battlefields and Indian War battlefields. And Paul came home looking really good and feeling really good. And that's when he decided to write a screenplay, whatever that was. Paul was and is the finest writer that I've ever personally known. And I'm gratified to be able to tell you that I was able to say that to him. Writers don't do that. As a writer, he had, no weaknesses that I could see, but he did have a huge weakness as a Hollywood writer because he was too blunt. He was too opinionated. He was way too honest. He would always say exactly what he thought, and there was no filter, no diplomacy, no mercy when it came to dealing with the executives and their ideas and their notes. And yes, it cost him, but it didn't cost him his honor. We had a pitch meeting once, set up with producers who really, really needed content and really, really wanted me, and so they got us. And Paul had this charming little story he'd concocted after reading some newspaper article about a young boy in West Texas who busted out his grandpa out of jail and had 2 horses tied up out back. And they went on a getaway spree, and it was classic. And I knew we could sell this. And I knew Paul could write this. And all I had to do was to get us through this one meeting unscathed. And the only thing that my agent told me in advance of this meeting was this: don't say it's a Western. Westerns, they come and go. They were popular, then they were out of fashion, and this was when they were out of fashion. We got in the room. I handled the chit-chat, with the suits, talked about the weather, the Dodgers, and then I teed it up for Paul. And I handed the bat to Paul. And the first thing out of his mouth, it's a Western. But we endured. We were like an old married couple in the end. Paul would drive up on occasion to Santa Barbara where we'd moved, and we'd work on some news story that one of us had cooked up. And Paul would come prepared, always prepared. In fact, he had reams of notes, and they were all handwritten in this impossible-to-read, minuscule style. I literally have gotten postcards from Paul over the years where I had to use a magnifying glass. I'm not kidding. He even brought his old Remington portable typewriter once, and I said, Paul, we'll use the computer. Writing with someone isn't easy, even when you're writing comedy, because you have to fight. It's just the way it works. You fight. And I would usually fight for the heartwarming side of things. And Paul would always fight for the ironic, darker side of things. And we'd wrestle. We would wrestle until the right idea won. And then we would find something, and it was never hard, to laugh at. And it would be 2 or 3 in the morning when it would suddenly hit us, and we would collapse in fits of laughter, sort of screaming loud enough to wake up Bev in the other room. We laughed so hard we'd cry, and then we'd have to quit and get up the next day, and we would start the process again. We wrote so many things, mostly spec scripts, speculative, meaning that no one's paying us, but we're gambling on ourselves. And we really had some good ones. They may not see the light of day, but some might. Most of them have held up pretty well, and it wasn't more than 2 weeks ago that I got an inquiry from a producer who said, whatever happened to script so-and-so? Oh, well, we had so many scripts optioned. That meant people were putting some money into exploring it, and we had so many meetings and so many near misses. But we also had our share of bullseyes, our wins. One memorable highlight was being on set for a movie we had written that was being filmed in Croatia when Croatia was at war. So it was dangerous, exciting times. It was Paul's first trip out of the country, his first time he'd set foot on a film set. and he was mesmerized by everything. Of course he was. I've seen those photos we took during filming in our side trip to the Cannes Film Festival, which was going on, where the paparazzi snapped Paul's picture, and along with the film's director and our star in the film, Martin Sheen. I happened to miss the photo op because I'd gone off to see what all the fuss was about this nude beach they have there. Teaching. Well, teaching gave Paul, I think, more satisfaction than anything except maybe handball. But it was in the classroom where he was being listened to. He was being appreciated. He knew that his ideas were getting out there finally. They were getting through. And that was the good part, because he knew they would live on. And they have in you students who are here. I don't remember where, but once upon a time, Paul said to me, "You know, Bear, there'll come a day when one of us is going to have to write the other's obituary." And then we argued about whose would be better. As it turned out, well, Snowy's was. Snowy's was. And bless you, Snowy and Dylan. The truth is, I couldn't have written that obituary. Not alone. Not without my writing partner. See you later, Paul.
Well, I helped put the program together today, so I don't know why I chose to go after Barry. That was a dumb decision. I would be also remiss not to mention that today is the day Wild Bill Hickok died in 1876. My dad always reminded me of that. And Custer, the same year, he said 1876 was a bad year for Westerners. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming. It means a lot to see old friends I haven't seen in a while. People from out of town, out of state, who made the trip for my dad. Just thank you all. This may seem obvious, but before last Sunday, I'd never known life without my dad. And in those 33 plus years, he taught me a lot. That the perfect place for a point guard to deliver a bounce pass on a fast break is right before the free throw line. That the only acceptable topping for lefse is butter and sugar, or brown sugar if you're feeling frisky. And that the standard story of William Shakespeare, a glover's son from Stratford-upon-Avon, is the biggest cover-up in the history of English literature. I only have a few minutes here, so mercifully I won't get into the intricacies of the Shakespeare authorship question or the politics of 16th century Elizabethan England. That's what the reception is for. But I will say that my dad became fascinated by this controversy because from an early age, he fell fiercely in love with the English language. He also knew from experience, as Barry has talked about, that writers write about themselves and that you don't pen something as powerful as Hamlet or King Lear without pouring your own life and soul into the work. For him, writing was never just a hobby or a mere exercise. One case in point, I remember I took a creative writing class when I studied abroad in London for a semester, and one of the assignments was to write a 100-word short story. And I wrote a draft, emailed it to my dad, and I expected maybe he'd come back with a couple line edits, words of encouragement. He sent pages and pages of notes, hundreds of words of feedback for my amateurish 100-word school assignment, and every one of his suggestions pointed me in a direction that made my story stronger, deeper, more mysterious and evocative. He cared deeply about words. I can still hear him in his office when he was working on screenplays, chewing over a particular line of dialogue under his breath until he got it just right. And that attention to detail extended into every aspect of his life. He kept all his records in meticulous order. He scrupulously typed out schedules for every youth sports practice or classroom lesson that he led. He was anxious to know what our dinner plans were, even if we hadn't eaten lunch yet. He always stocked up on my favorite snacks, usually Doritos and lemonade, whenever he knew I was coming home to visit, even when I was in my 30s. And recently I was going through the old photo albums, and I noticed that he had written these comprehensive captions describing every person and place in that neat handwriting, sometimes adding a humorous or philosophical comment. One example that really touched me was my close friend Garrett Hill, who many of you know, passed away in 2021. And there's a picture of Garrett and I on a basketball team from 5th grade. Underneath, my dad had added a new recent caption. It said, "New focus, Garrett Hill, seated next to Snowy." Some simple words that meant a lot, knowing that he had returned to these photos and that he'd added a note acknowledging my friend and my grief. He knew that language had power even when there wasn't an audience. One of the blessings of having a father who was a writer is that he left a large part of himself behind. He preserved his personality throughout thousands of pages. He captured his voice across literally millions of words that will transcend his passing. A trail of manuscripts and marginalia that we'll get to follow for the rest of our lives. He filled every corner of the books that he read and those that he loved, even the books that he hated, especially the books that he hated, probably, with all kinds of comments and critiques. I think we all know that my dad was never one to sugarcoat his opinions. It may have gotten him into trouble a few times, but it's one of the things I most respected about him. It meant that when he offered praise, he really meant it. When he laughed at something, a particularly well-written episode of Seinfeld, or a hilarious line from The Big Lebowski, he laughed with every fiber of his being, a deep belly laugh that brought tears to his eyes and left him gasping for air. There was not a phony bone in his body. One of the last, real conversations I had with him was on Father's Day this year. He wasn't in good shape, and I had to fly back to Iowa soon. So I wrote him a note trying to express how much he meant to me. My emotions were raw, and my message was pretty syrupy and sentimental. He read it once and said, "It's a little gushy." The words did sting for a moment, but he was absolutely right. It was not my most refined or restrained work. But then he read it again. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You're a wonderful young man." And he said the same thing about Dylan many, many times. That was our dad. A sharp edge softened with sweetness. In a way, eulogizing your father is a fool's errand, especially a father who shaped me as much as my dad did and shaped my brother. How can we distill a lifetime of impact into 7 minutes? More than anyone else, my dad made me into the man I am today. His passion for literature and history, particularly the Civil War, has certainly rubbed off on me. I got my BA in English literature, and now I'm pursuing a PhD in 19th century American history. It's probably not a coincidence after everything you've heard about my dad. My taste for all things tart, including raw rhubarb stalks and lemon juice plucked from our trees in the backyard, much to my dentist's perpetual horror, also stems from my dad. My obsession with the music of Bob Dylan, I think, can be blamed on him, and maybe my mom too. I mean, there's a reason my brother's name is Dylan. He even made me a Minnesota Vikings fan, though to be fair, he did give me plenty of warning, always cautioning me not to get my hopes up because they'll always break your heart in the end. And the more intangible things that I strive to attain every day, honesty and integrity, sincerity and empathy, were learned in large part by observing my dad. Remember, whenever we sat at a red light next to somebody holding up a cardboard sign asking for help, he almost never failed to give them a few dollars, and sometimes quite a bit more than that. Every year before Christmas, he'd drive around town and drop off holiday bonuses for his mechanic, his barber, even receptionists who had helped him out during the year. Small acts of kindness that left a big impact. So yes, it's an impossible task to condense all that down into a single speech. I could easily turn this into a 24-hour filibuster like Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But you're all nice folks, and you probably have places to be. So, my dad was always into the whole brevity thing anyways. So I'll end by focusing on my first and last memories of him. I'll try to bring it all back home to our friend Bill Shakespeare, or Edward de Vere, as my dad would have called him. The phrase, "parting is such sweet sorrow," comes from Romeo and Juliet. It's been ringing through my head recently because memories of my dad are bookended by parting. The first memory occurred when I was 3 years old. He had dropped me off at preschool, and even though it wasn't my first day, I was suddenly overcome by the strange fear that I would never see him again. As he was walking away, he turned around to wave goodbye. He saw that I was crying, and he rushed back to the gate, comforting me until I was calm enough to go play in the sandbox with my friends. Less than a week ago, I tried to return the favor, soothing him as he embarked on his new journey, or what his favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, called a wild night and a new road. I told him how precious our phone calls had been to me. I've lived out of state for many years now, but at least once a week, my dad and I would have lengthy phone conversations that sometimes stretched to nearly 2 hours, updating each other on our lives and going down rabbit holes of history. It's hard to accept that I'll never have one of those conversations again. I'll never get to hear his happy voice say, "Oh, Snowski Boski," as he answers the phone. But on that last day, I asked him, wherever he's going now, if they have a phone there, to please answer when I try to call. I don't know what happens when we die. Neither did my dad. It's the great mystery that he grappled with throughout his life and art, and I think it's part of what pushed him to pick up a pen in the first place. So I don't know if there's a phone there, or if there's even a there, but I do know that our connection will remain clear and unbroken through a fathomless fount of memories that I will forever cherish, through the labyrinth of literature and language that he left behind, and through the unbreakable bond of a love that even death cannot defeat. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. And now I think my mom would like to come and say a few words.
Susan Guntner changed my whole life forever. It was 1987, and she and Steve invited me over to their house for a blind date. I was lucky because they set me up with the most handsome man I'd ever seen, Paul. Susan said that our connection was electric, and by the end of the night, we barely knew that Susan and Steve were even in the room. Paul came to my door immediately the next day after the blind date, and we stayed together forever. We're still together forever. He will live in my heart for eternity. Within a few years, we had 2 boys. Paul wanted boys, and he got them, Dylan and Snowy. And Paul was so thrilled and so happy to start a new chapter in his life. He loved coaching their teams, and he inspired so many other boys beyond just our 2 sons. He took care of all of us, including many pets. He was a great cook, and whenever the meal was pork chops or cheeseburgers, he made sure to make a special vegetarian dish just for me. He knew I didn't want the meat. He did hard yard work, and fix things around the house. And if I tried to climb a ladder, he would come out, shout out, and say, "Don't do that." He did that many times. Don't touch that. He loved to coach sports, but more than that, he talked to kids, brought them in, and made them feel included in the big picture of life and what it means to be a part of a team. Everybody was welcome. It will take some time, probably the best of my life, to get over what we all lost, because Paul was the best man. Do you want to go? Okay.
Dylan and I will play some music momentarily. I can play one more while we wait. I wrote this song for my dad years ago. As we all know, he was 77 when he passed, so he was, I'm 33, so you can do the math. And the phrase came into my head, "my old man." So I wrote this song for him. I haven't played it in a while, so bear with me.
Traveling hard by the time I arrived. You were 49 when I was 5. You turned 54 when I was 10. Always older than the fathers of my friends. I heard that you had been young and wild way back when, but this was now and that was then. They say age is just a number, but we're running out of time, and the years keep getting shorter the longer we're alive. So you squeezed a little tighter my old man. You were slowing down when I left home, off to wander in your footsteps on my own. Out at night on the road all alone. You were slowing down when I left home. A letter and a phone call, holidays in town. You had so much to tell me, and the clock was ticking down. So I looked a little harder, hoping I could understand how I might be a father with integrity and honor like you, my old man. Now I'm getting older, far away. I hope I can be half the man you are someday. When I'm feeling lost, your North Star lights the way. Now I'm getting older, far away. Wisdom and compassion, all the gifts you give, taught me by example how to love and live. Though you could have been younger, I will never trade my hand. I will live my life with wonder till the day they call my number. Full of kindness, full of hunger, full of you, my old man.
Testing.
All right, I gotta tune up really quick. So we're gonna do the Beck song first.
You want to do it? Tell me when. Sorry, they're new strings, and you gotta kind of, they don't stay in tune as well when you first put them on. Okay, that's close enough. Oh, that one is on, okay. Okay, start playing that riff.
I've been drifting along in the same stale shoes, loose ends tying the noose in the back of my mind. If you thought that you
I'm out of tune. Hold on just a second, sorry. Okay.
Alright, sorry. Okay, that's alright. Okay. It's because I'm tuned down a half step.
You want to do the Minnesota one? Go that one?
No, I'm tuned down too low. Let me just get it up to concert pitch. Sorry about that. Still too low, isn't it?
You need a note?
No, it's just because I'm tuned down so low, it's not concert pitch.
Would it work for the lean one?
I've been drifting along in the same stale shoes, loose ends tying the noose in the back of my mind. If you thought that you were making your way to where the puzzles and pagans lay, put it together, it's a strange invitation. I've been drifting along in the same stale shoes, loose ends tying the noose in the back of my mind. If you thought that you were making your way to where the puzzles and pagans lay, put it together, it's a strange invitation. Invitation. Strange invitation. Sitting on the hood of a Camaro, watching shooting stars across the air. Gone without notice, in days with faraway eyes. without notice. In the days with faraway eyes, counting all the places we have been to. There goes my Minnesota girl.
We're going to end with...
Louine?
Yeah.
Can I just say a couple words?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, other than Snowy, I was the only one that knew him as Dad. So I just have a couple things I'd like to say. And just like you went on a little too long in your Rain Man speech, Barry, we're gonna, for the Oscar, we're gonna go on a little bit longer, you know. Well, I'm Dylan, his firstborn son, and my dad really delineated his life as beginning at age 40 when I was born. In fact, even just a couple months before his death, when his mind was fading in a delirious haze, I showed him a picture of me holding me as a newborn baby in August of '88, and he told me, as he had told me many times before, that was the happiest day of my life. My dad and I were very close, and he was really my best friend, and we understood each other in a way that only a father and son could. Some of my favorite memories of my dad are, of course, sports-related, Little League and baseball games. Not just playing them, just sitting around and just talking about sports and watching the Angels games. And talking about sports was really just a conduit to have a conversation with my dad and spend more time with him. As been mentioned, my dad loved to play and write about handball. And some of my fondest memories are going to the Nationals in Orange County and getting to see David Chapman and handball legends like that. And I'll never forget the ethereal sights, sounds, and smells that handball conjured up in relation to the pure freedom I associate with my idyllic childhood. Handball is kind of like this little secret society, and I would very much like to play it more as a tribute to my dad. And I just enjoy playing. I love to play. And Snowy and I, we would play 3-wall at the high school in the last few years. And Snowy stopped wanting to play after a while because it was just too intense for him. And because there was a 75% chance, you weren't going to beat me. And it was really more like some sort of emotional and physical exorcism versus a friendly little pickleball game. And I think that's kind of what my dad loved about it. And as Snowy talked about, 100% Norwegian, he could maybe, come across as cold, but I think it was really more just a realness about him. And like you said, you saw him when he was happy, he was genuinely happy. He wasn't faking it. And what my dad really had both in common is we're both creative people, and he was so happy when I started playing the guitar and taking guitar lessons, and he pushed me into doing it. And he genuinely didn't care whether I would end up working at Der Wiener Schnitzel, as he called it, or being a multi-millionaire. He didn't really care. He just wanted me to be happy and to enjoy my life. And I really think, unconditional love is really the only reason that you should bring someone into this world that we live in. And there shouldn't be any other reason. My dad had a wonderful sense of humor. We would rib each other in a way, as men do, that he never really did as much with Snowy because that wasn't the nature of their relationship as much. A lot of the times my dad's response to one of my quips was, "Okay, Norm," as a reference to the late, great deadpan comedian Norm Macdonald, who I was clearly aping in some ways. And he also would say, "You talk more than my sister." He would always say that. It was mostly the caffeine talking. I remember just a few years ago, my dad said it didn't seem like the right time for him to die yet because his life would feel incomplete. He wanted to see how things would end up for Snowy and I. And I feel almost as bad about him not getting to see that as him actually passing away. My dad could be fairly dark, as I said, and he would joke about death. He says, well, I'll be in Valhalla when that happens. And the only time I really felt like he truly meant it was a couple months ago when he was suffering. He didn't jokingly say, I'll be in Valhalla. He said, I wish I was dead. And maybe if the Minnesota Vikings finally win a Super Bowl this year, I'll take that as a sign that you're with Odin and Thor, and
instead of that whole Jesus Christ myth. The closest belief I have to afterlife is that Nietzsche eternal recurrence theory, that we just keep repeating the same lives over and over again. And I think that that's where deja vu, and I may seem like some little character to you, and you know, you couldn't imagine anything else happening, and that's the only thing that I'm sort of open to as a non-religious person, because nothing would make me happier than being able to repeat my life with my dad and recite the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cassette tape that I had memorized to him like I did in 1992. Those memories I really only have from old VHS tapes, though, of our family movies. My more cherished memories of my dad come more from our second act, when I was in my mid-20s and we bonded over our new Springer Spaniel dog, Willie. And we started taking him to the dog park in Upland, and he was the nucleus of our family along with our cat, Ike. And we'd go to the batting cages, and we were going out to movies and stuff like that. And my dad, he got sober from alcohol in 1997, and he stayed that way for the rest of his life. And if you look at a picture of him in 1998, you can really see the difference in terms of his weight. And that wasn't easy for him to do. And he understood right away why I didn't like being high and drunk around Willie. My dad said, well, it's because he's just on pure air over there. And that's how I've been for over a decade, too, just on pure air and coffee. And when Willie passed away in my arms in November of 2023, it was really hard on all of us, especially Paul, because his brain was already deteriorating at that point, although we didn't realize it. And after Willie's heart diagnosis in June 2023, I would hear my dad just howling and weeping in his bedroom. We chalked it up to depression, but clearly there were other things going on. And my dad ended up passing away in a nursing home in San Dimas, which is also where I scattered Willie's ashes into the Pudding Stone Lake at Medley Park, where I learned recently every fight scene from the original Power Rangers TV show was filmed. This next line is for anyone who's seen The Big Lebowski, which was my dad and I's favorite movie. And our other family friend, Pete Saragusa, was actually in the film. He was an actor, and he played Gary the bartender. And so, Paul Howard Gronseth, in accordance with what we think your dying wishes might well have been, we commit your final mortal remains into the bosom of Pudding Stone Lake to be at peace with Willie, whom you love so well. Good night, sweet prince. And just one other thing, when I was working on this at like 4 a.m. last night, there was a couple of really strange things that have happened since my dad died. And one was the night he died, there was this loud crashing sound. And it was just like something had just exploded. And I knew that, he would be in my dream that night, and he was. And it was very comforting. But what even stranger happened last night, around 4 a.m, my cousin Ann is here from Boston, who I haven't really seen, since I was a kid because of the geographic. I don't really travel very much, honestly. And anyways, I swear to God, my phone was not on. I was trying to get to bed about 4 a.m, and I looked down at my phone, and it was calling Ann. And I had no explanation for how that happened. Let me just tune up. This is a song by Ween, and it's for Willie and Dad.
Willie, furry buddy, shoot his leg on the porch. Why'd you do it, Willie? On the porch. Good dog, Willie, old friend, my pal. Willie's got on the porch. Snowy, he's my buddy. Sits there with me on the porch. Takes Willie the porch. Snowy takes Willie for a walk out on the path. Willie chased the doggies on the path. The pig says to Snowy, get Willie back on the porch. Snowy looks pretty on the porch. The pig says to Snowy, get Willie back on. So me and Snowy and Willie on the porch. Take 'em off, Snowy. really quick.
His firstborn son. Thanks, Snowy. Claremont, you guys don't have anything else to do.
Air. There is no castration fear in a chair. You will be dance. We'll dance. We'll dance. We'll dance. But no one will dance with us. Not in this zany town. Chim, 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 sing a song of praise for your elders. They're in the bag. Pick out some Brazilian nuts for your engagement. Check that expiration date, man. Later than you think. You can't enjoy yourself. I can't enjoy myself. You can't enjoy yourself. I can't enjoy myself. Move that swing and watch it break straight like an arc. Won't be there to lift you. 'Cause I don't have a clue anymore. Maybe we could dance. Maybe we could dance. Maybe we could dance. Together. 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 There's time you'll see, and then you'll be 5 times forever, and you'll never get lost. I love you, Dad.
Thank you. A final word, I believe. There's going to be a reception, is that right? A gathering in the fellowship hall immediately following. So after the benediction, we have another piece of music that we're going to enjoy, but then the family can recess, and we'll gather again in the fellowship hall, which is just to the right and down. So you'll see where the gathering is. Let us close in prayer. Eternal One, God of our birth, of our life, and of our death, amid all the changes in life, this we affirm, that your love is constant and encompasses all. And thus we give you thanks. You've designed this world and you hold it in the cradle of your hand. You give us life and friends to love, and now we ask for faith and trust that you will hold them in your loving care in this life and in the life to come. So we do praise you for all people who, having lived this life well, now live on into eternity. We thank you for Paul, for the gift of his life, for his love and generous spirit, for all in him that was creative and vivid and full of grace. We thank you that he made a difference in this world and in the world of those gathered here, had a share in it. Now give us such faith that by day and by night we may, without fear, trust Paul to your loving care. Holy One, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then in your mercy grant us safe lodging and a holy rest and peace at the last. In the name of the eternal we pray. Amen. The word benediction literally means good word, and the good word is the last word. The family asked that we include this prayer, so I'm going to make it the benediction because it is the good word. They say, "Gracious God, we are grateful for the life of Paul and for the love we have shared with him. As we say our goodbyes, help us carry his memory in our hearts and live our lives in a way that honors his legacy. May it be so, and to that we all say, amen."